Anastasia Amoroso from JP Morgan Private Bank and Shannon Sakosha from Boston Private Wealth are still with us. And Kumar Sri Kumar joins us from Sri Kumar Global Strategies. Very good afternoon to you. Anastasia, I'll come to you first of all. And in fact, I'll touch on one of these factors that I just mentioned there into the close of gold down, oil down. You've mentioned inflation fears.
Good afternoon. We'll get going in just a second.
Is it in fact equities or some of those other assets?
I think definitely equities. It has to be
Interesting last, I would say, 15 minutes of the markets.
energy and financials are the two sectors that stand out to us.
A little bit crazy. For those following the stocks that I have a lot of Amazon. Let me lower the volume on this. Amazon's having a big day. They're starting to count votes in a union vote in Alabama, which will be significant. There's the question of, workers' rights, and Amazon pays more than most in Alabama. $15 an hour is a lot of money, but there was accusations of not getting bathroom breaks or mistreatment or what have you. So they pushed to unionize. If it passes, it opens the door for far more Amazon distribution centers to unionize as well. So it could be a significant cost to Amazon. If it doesn't, I think their stock will go up. So I find myself in a tough situation, but in general, I err on the side of unionization. I support, for the most part, unions. I often think, however, that, for many of these unions, especially public sector unions, we're battling against not a corporation, but ability to pay. And so that at times doesn't often, in my opinion, end up in a fair fight. But we've talked about that before, and we'll talk about that again in the future. All right, so thanks for joining me. It's Tuesday on March 30th, 2021. Tomorrow, we will have Vin Candelora. He confirmed that he'll be on tomorrow. Next week, we've talked to Robin Comey. We'll probably have her on. So we're trying to get through all the state reps. We'll reach out to Christine Cohen. I want to have Joe Zullo on as well. And at some point that I forgot his name, the new representative in Madison, as we kind of expand the towns that we're reaching a little bit along the shoreline. And so thanks for joining me. And that's the plan for the next couple of weeks. All right. So for discussions today, a lot of questions came in yesterday about the discussion on affordable housing. So let me just say this. No, I don't see another way to fight this particular project in Brantford. If you're not watching from Brantford, yesterday was primarily about a project called Parkside, a 50-unit facility that's going to be torn down and rebuilt with a single building, a 67-unit facility. It had wait a minute, hold on. Volker, I was finally able to remember the name of Coffee Continental. They changed their name? All right, so somebody just put Coffee Continental is a little place in Brantford, which is excellent. I didn't realize they changed their name, so I need to find out about that. The best bread pudding I've ever had. I'm not a big dessert guy. If you're a bread pudding guy or a dessert person, go. It is the creamiest. It's just unbelievable. Go get bread pudding at Coffee Con Canella on School Ground Road in Brantford. Spectacular. They are not an advertiser. Go get it. But yesterday, I do not know. I mean, at this point, the legal aspects are handled. Unless some crazy lawsuit pops up from the neighbors. Arturo's Restaurant. So here's a story about Coffee Con Canella. I was in there with a friend of mine about a year ago, and we sat at the restaurant and we said, you need to change the name. Nobody knew what Coffee Con Canella meant. What Coffee Con Canella was, it's like a coffee place, but they have lunch and some dinners. It's kind of this eclectic thing. He is, I don't know, Mexican, I guess. But I don't want to sound racist. I just don't know which one, if it's Spanish or Mexican. But he was also the head chef at Trey Scalini in New Haven. So he actually was a brilliant chef. His food is spectacular. And we're sitting there and we're saying they did Coffee Con Canella, coffee as in English, con and canella, Spanish and Italian. So they put 3 different languages in the title. No one understood what it was. And so it was killing them. They were in a terrible location on School Ground Road, and nobody knew what it actually was. And so we said, you need to change this, put Arturo's name in it, Arturo's Restaurant, Kitchen, whatever, that will work. And they fought it and fought it and fought it. They love Coffee Con Canella. If they change the name, I am so proud of them. Smart move that will help their business. Still, go there and get their bread pudding. It is the single greatest dessert I've ever had. It's spectacular. There. Good. That's my plug for Coffee Con Canella. An unpaid plug for Coffee Con Canella. While we're at that, if you need work done on your car, go to Jiffy Lube. I know you think it's oil changes. They do everything. I had a starter issue, dropped it off one morning. It was done 3 hours later. They handle starters, alternators, all that stuff. Chris Hood's a good guy. Go there as well. All right, so enough of the advertisements. Let's get to affordable housing. I don't know how to stop that project. It happened. It's not the end of the world. No matter what, it'll look better than it does now. They have promised that the people who live there now will have a place. Do I truly believe that? I don't know. Will they do things to scare people out? I don't know. We'll be watching, but it's done. My issue yesterday was CHAFA gives money to these organizations based on what they apply for. CHAFA does not say, were there better options? The Connecticut Housing Authority. They give out federal tax credits. They awarded, for the first year, $1.8 million in tax credits. That's a 10-year plan. So that plan, that Parkside will get $18 million in tax credits. Those tax credits are sold on the market to corporations, whoever wants to buy them. They will pay 90 cents on the dollar. So Beacon, the developer, will get about $16.5 million in exchange for the government giving $18 million in tax credits over 10 years to an outside company. To taxpayers, that's $18 million. It's less than that when we adjust for inflation in those out years, but $18 million. We are paying or not getting $18 million in tax dollars that we would have otherwise gotten for this project. And my issue is that I don't see any government agency saying, is that value? Are we getting the most for our money? I don't see it. And I talked to CHAFA at length Monday and said, do you look at alternative sites? Do you look at other proposals for the area? Do you look at, no, they don't consider any of that. They just look at, they have a scoring system on the application that is made. In that particular case, during their lengthy application process, in which they changed it numerous times, it's on them, not the town. They weren't going to be affordable housing, and they were going to be affordable housing, and they moved house design, and they moved again house design. It was all on them. As part of that process, they said that they went and looked at 10 other sites. I called some of the landlords or the property owners on those sites, and they never heard from Beacon. So did they go there? Yes. At one site on Branford Hill, I went up there, and I was there with a friend of mine walk in at the same time somebody from Beacon was there in the Housing Authority. So I know they went to look at sites, but they never called to find out what the sites would cost. They never called the property owners. They never really did due diligence. They didn't want to. They wanted to keep this where it was. And my question to CHAFA was there any way to confirm that this $18 million that the taxpayers are handing us out for this project is the best use of that $18 million? And instead of saying, wait a minute, let's only judge the merits of a particular project in an area, we could instead say, what is the best way to address affordable housing in a geographic region as opposed to one specific plot of land? Nobody's doing that. Nobody looked and said, wait a minute, for $18 million, what if we can get 120 units? What if we can help double the amount of people? What if we can get 150, 160 units? We have massive developers. We're building apartment units, nice apartment units here in Branford. Smith is building over by Days Inn. That's coming down. Meritoli's building over across from the train station. Multiple hundreds of units in some of these projects. And I could probably tell you they're less than $18 million to build them. $18 million for 67 units, 60 units of affordable housing. $300,000 a unit, I can guarantee you there are developers that could build condos and apartments for less than $300,000 a unit. There's no one at the state level who oversees the Branford Housing Authority to stop and say, is this actually a good use of money? Forget the argument on whether we should fund affordable housing or not. Forget that. But I think everybody can agree, and everyone should agree, that if we have tax dollars going towards a project, that those tax dollars should be spent to get the most bang for the buck, the greatest value. to help the most amount of people possible. And in this case, this project is, in my opinion, the least amount of people possible. It doesn't make sense anywhere. Yet a giant Boston corporation came in and took advantage of a ridiculous law. And so we're wasting $18 million in tax dollars that we will no longer get as tax credits that will go towards this project. That's what's wrong with this project. And it doesn't make sense to me. I hope that answers some of the questions that came in. No one is saying we don't want affordable housing. Affordable housing is fine. Nothing wrong with affordable housing. There's nothing wrong with guaranteeing that housing has a certain percentage of the median income. If you want to know what affordable housing is, we look at it this way. What's the median income of the area? In this area, when you take East Haven, some North Branford, it's probably around $75,000. We want to make sure that someone's housing cost is no more than a third of that. So we want their housing cost to be in the $25,000 range. Housing is not just rent. So $25,000, $2,000 a month. If your basic utilities, electric, gas, what have you, and rent come up to $2,000 a month, in that ballpark. We're using very general numbers here. Are there rents in Branford that come into that? Yeah, there's a ton of them. They're just not counted. So that needs to be changed. How we count the apartments and the living units that are counted as affordable housing needs to change. If we had more than 10%, this law would not apply to us in Branford, in any town. But $18 million for that project is a massive, massive, massive waste of taxpayer dollars. And to anybody who questions that, find a developer. Make a call to a developer and ask them, what is the general cost per unit for an apartment complex? It's not $300,000. You can get a lot more. Buy a property anywhere you want and put it up, hopefully on a transportation line. So that's the point of what I was saying yesterday, and I hope that was clear. If there are more questions, feel free to ask them. The other thing I want to talk about today is last week we had Sean Scanlon on, and we talked in detail about the child tax credit. Now, as part of the most recent stimulus package, there was a child tax credit that was included that will be, to a certain extent, temporary, right? So the current child tax credit, if you have a kid, it's $2,000 a year on your taxes. It will increase to $3,600, and for a year, instead of being a tax credit, it will be a monthly check that they will pay you. That ends, however. That should be a year. Sean Scanlon has proposed a tax credit at a state level. And that the tax credit will be $600 per child. I forgot the exact age groups that it includes. But up to people making, as a married couple, $200,000 a year. So I have a few issues with that. I don't have a problem with the overall idea of a tax credit. There are two things that actually, in my opinion, have a massive, massive impact on our economy. I prefer laws that get people to work. I want laws that encourage them to work and take away some of the biggest obstacles to finding a new job, furthering your career, that sort of thing. And so there are two things, and there may be Republicans that hate me for saying this, but this is where I stand by, understanding economics, understanding why people keep jobs that are not great jobs, why people cannot get into the workforce. Two significant areas I look at. One is the amount of people who cannot leave a job that may not be a great job because of healthcare. The idea that people will work for Walmart instead of furthering their career, or work for a fast food place instead of further, is healthcare. They're getting benefits. These companies aren't dumb. You could pay your workers less and provide healthcare, and people will have a hard time leaving. That's done on purpose. They understand that. You can use socialized medicine. You can say national healthcare. You can say Obamacare. You can say Romney care. I don't care. Providing people healthcare to the point that they can leave a job and still get healthcare would be a massive boom to the economy. No question about it. People can further a career. They can take leaps. They can take chances without worrying about getting sick or a pre-existing condition. The second aspect of it, of getting people to work, is childcare. Now, we live in a world now where more and more people are single. Years ago, everybody got married at 19. You started a family. You can live on one income. Somebody stayed at home, husband, father, whatever, or mother, whatever, stayed home and raised the kids. That's not happening now. We have a ton of single mothers. We have a lot of single fathers. We want to get them off state aid. We want to get them off government programs. To do that, we need to let them go to work or let them go to school. To do that, we have to provide childcare. So I know the thought process on a broad level is if we increase the child tax credit, some of that will go towards childcare. What I would do differently is I would drastically increase care for kids. Drastically increase money that goes directly to childcare. As opposed to giving an increased child tax credit to people making $200,000 a year, I'd rather pay a larger portion of childcare for those people who aren't even in the workforce yet or making minimum wage or close to it. So instead of the $600 tax credit to people making $200,000 or couples with $200,000, I would increase that tax credit for people under $100,000 or couples under $80,000 or what have you, to give those people more money to get them out the door to work. That's my first step. Or to college. If they need help getting to school, I want to provide that childcare. The problem I see, so I went through the process. I went to Care for Kids, and you could do this with me. We could do this now. If we went to Care for Kids website, and I'm going to look for, am I eligible? Click here for the tools. And so you get to this eligibility screening tool, then you get to a screener. And it asks, so I'm going to put, ask for your zip code, 06405. I'm going to put that in there here in Brantford. Are you currently working or starting a new job? And so the question is, it's a yes or no. Am I currently working or starting a new job? That could be the case. But if I want to know if I'll get childcare, if I go search for a job, I'm not currently working, I'm not starting a new job. That's a big demographic. I want to encourage people to get to work. I'm going to put no here because I don't have a job lined up. Let's just, potentially put no. Are you currently participating in a jobs first employment services training? No. You do not appear to be eligible since you are not in a Care for Kids approved activity. So here's the problem with this. I appreciate those that are working can apply for Care for Kids. I appreciate those who are starting a new job that can apply for Care for Kids. That's great. We need to expand this program that you can apply for Care for Kids and get approved and go search for jobs knowing you have that approval. This is like getting a pre-approved for a home mortgage. You want to go and find out how much you can afford, and can you do this before you actually start looking for houses. If you go hire a real estate agent, the first thing they're going to say is how much you've been pre-approved for. If you ask a single mother or a single father to start looking for work, and they sit down in front of me or any business owner, and we're going to say, when can you start? The answer, I don't know, I have to apply for childcare, and that may take a few months, is not an acceptable answer. It's crazy. I want to encourage that group to get out into the workforce. So possibly instead of, or potentially in lieu of, to a certain extent, the child tax credit, I would expand Care for Kids for people who are beginning the search for work. There is about, and talking to a few parents in the last two or 3 days that have done this, there's about a 2-month process to get approved. A ton of paperwork. They told me they kept coming back for more paperwork to get approved for child care for kids. If you get a job, you can't wait for 2 months. In the cases of those that I talked to, they had parents or someone else who could pay for child care for those 2 months. In the meantime, hoping to get care for kids. But if you're a single mom without those options, or single father without those options, and I want to encourage you to go to work, I want to tell you now, you go to work, you'll have Care for Kids. Now, there's a flip side to this. And talking to people who are administrators, is they will tell you there are people who apply for Care for Kids, drop their kids off, and don't actually work. So what I would do in some way, shape, or form, and the legislatures would have to figure this out, is instead of a direct child tax credit, I would remove the $200,000 cap and lower that for couples down to $100,000, for a single person to $75,000. At that point, I would say, let's expand Care for Kids to a point that people can get approved before looking for work, or a faster approval process. and also a better plan to make sure that it's going to people who are actually working. Dropping off your kids and going to the beach, dropping off your kids and going shopping is not why we should be spending tax dollars on somebody. It doesn't make sense. We can expand that program and encourage more people to get to work or go to school. It takes the money we would spend on a child tax credit and guarantees it goes towards childcare. Guarantees it gets more people able to go to work. It guarantees that when they go on that interview, they know they have childcare from day one. They don't have to tell that interviewer, it depends on what the government approves. It depends on how much funding I can get. In my mind, that could be a game changer. I would love to hear the other side of that. But that makes more sense to me than saying, let's give a child tax credit to everyone at a certain income level, especially if those are $200,000. $200,000 for a couple with a kid or two? They can afford it. Doesn't mean it's not tough. And Sean Scanlon's point, and it's a good one, listen, taxes are going to go up. We know this. At some point, the income tax is going to go up. Maybe sales tax goes up. At some point, taxes are going to go up. The question is, he's leading off with some of the benefits of those tax increases. That is politically savvy. It used to be, we're behind, let's raise taxes. Now it's, okay, let's look at some of the benefits that we would see if we raise taxes. So now you know when those taxes are going up, yes, some of it's going towards the deficits. Yes, some of it's going to go towards pensions. Yes, some of it's going to go towards some mismanagement. But it's also going towards getting people back to work, getting people who have kids, middle class and lower classes who have kids and need help with that. I respect that. But that limit being $200,000 means there's money going to people who are not desperate. Will it help? Sure, it's extra money. But in many ways, the same as the stimulus. We gave $1,400 to people who were quite fine. There were families getting $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 checks who didn't lose any money during this shutdown. Didn't lose anything to COVID. In fact, many of them made more. If they were in the medical field or in the building trades, they made a fortune. Maybe they were still under that limit of 140, but they got money for all those kids. So does it make sense to give that money to that group of people, or does it make sense to concentrate the money more on the people who need it most? And to take a more Republican conservative view, to enforce better people who are actually working, and to have people who are searching for jobs not having that application delay to get child care. That's the issue that I have with that tax credit. The tax credit might be the easiest thing in the world, and maybe some legislator can tell me, and Robin Comey will be on next week. We can talk to her about this. She'd probably be the best person to talk to. But how difficult would it be to change to care for kids? I mean, I'm sure there are advocates for just giving care for kids more money. But is there some way to make sure, one, that application process is much faster so that when somebody is actually going for a job or before they apply for their first job, they can make sure they have coverage? So they can go to that employer and that employer can tell them yes, or you can tell that employer, yes, we have coverage for our kids. We want to, whether you're Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, no matter what it is, encourage people to work. Encourage people to be able to go to school. Childcare is a huge way to do that. A simple tax credit is nice. It's money back to the lower classes. That's great. But there's a lot of people in the middle class where if we didn't include them at that $200,000 level, we can really give some significant help to those at the bottom and get more people in a classroom or get more people working and contributing to the economy. So those are the two topics I wanted to talk about today. I know Sean and I talked quite a bit about that $200,000 limit. At one point, they talked about a $400,000 limit. Down to 200, I think, is a step in the right direction. But I like this kind of look at it both ways. Let's support the people who want to work. Let's use that tax credit for people who are looking. A single mom, here's the problem, and I talked to probably 10 single mothers with young children in the last week, specifically about this. Here's what they tell me. The first problem is to get a lot of state aid or federal aid, there are income limits. So they might be at or near that limit, and here's what happens. They ask their employers to work off the books because they're right up against some limit. If they make $20 more, $30 more, $40, they lose food stamps, they lose what have you. We need to address that. We need to not discourage them from working more by losing their benefits. So we can raise that cap, or we can have a sliding scale. In some way, shape, or form, we want to encourage them to work more. 2, it took 2 months to get childcare. So if they don't have somebody who can drop, and in some cases, $500 a week on childcare, a parent or cousin or whatever it is that can help fund that, they don't have childcare for that time. And if you have to wait a couple months, that could be $4,000 or $5,000 in childcare you're going to spend if you start a new job. No one's going to do that. They're not going to be able to do that. So we want to change that process, get approved for childcare before they begin their job hunt or before they begin going to school. If I have somebody in school learning or working, they're productive and they're building a future. That's what we want. And I think that's kind of a good mix of the left wanting to support the lower classes and the right saying we want people back to work. Let's give them a way back there. Let's not discourage them from working more. I mean, I've seen a million, especially waitresses that are saying, let me work under the table. They do it, the waitress, so they can get some tips in cash. People now pay with credit cards. That hurts them. So they're limiting their hours to make sure they can maintain their benefits, because we don't have we have that zone there where if they lose their benefits, they're making a lot less and they're just in no man's land. We need to address that as well. I want to see things that get people back to work, producing something, a benefit to the economy, to the greater good. If we do that, we're helping everybody. We'll talk about socialized medicine at another time because I know that's going to be far more controversial. But at the end of the day, how many people in your life have you known that have not left a job that they hate for a better opportunity because they had good health care where they were? It's a ton of people. A ton of people who have not furthered their career because they didn't want to give up the health care they had at a less than perfect job. A job that didn't push them forward. They had opportunities. They went on LinkedIn, they went on Indeed, they went on Monster, they looked at all these other jobs. There were jobs that they said, I want this job, but it didn't have health care immediately, or it wasn't the same level of health care, and they had kids they had to worry about. That could be a game changer as well. And we'll talk about that in far more detail in another podcast. That said, tomorrow is Vin Candelora. We'll talk to him about some state issues. We will certainly talk. All the questions I've gotten have been on zoning. As we talked about with Sean, I don't think a lot of those things will pass. You know, we have, as a member of the press or podcast or whatever, we have to make a decision. At times, people make zoning a big issue when most people in Hartford know this law ain't going anywhere. Do we cover it and give it credence? Or do we not and get accused of not covering talking points for one side? That's always this catch-22. So we will absolutely talk about it. We've seen the issue with the Affordable Housing Law, 830G. I don't see a law. I cannot see for the life of me our delegates voting for a law that would impact local zoning. I could be wrong. We'll ask them if they come on, but I just can't see that happening. So these laws likely aren't going to go anywhere. But still, we'll talk about it tomorrow with Vin Candelora. The other thing we'll talk about, because he made a statement about it too. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about a statement made by Lamont that the right is kind of considering racist, and it was about white men not getting their COVID vaccination. And he said something along the lines of, well, let's set up something at a NASCAR race. And I don't get it because I'm a white guy and I'm not all that big a fan of NASCAR, but some people, looked at that as racist, and Candelora actually made a statement on that. So we'll talk to him about that tomorrow as well. So we will let you know the schedule. We talked to Robin earlier today. She'll come on next week. Tomorrow, 4 o'clock, we'll have Vin Candelora. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you get outside. Enjoy a great night. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so get outside today and enjoy it. And thanks for joining. I hope you all have a great night.